The stars had been quiet for 3,000 years. In the vast emptiness of space, the Zephyrian coalition ruled over 47 star systems with perfect order. Their ships moved like clockwork through the galaxy, their weapons fired with deadly precision, and their armies had never known defeat. High Commander Vexthara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue and green planets slowly rotate below them. Earth looked peaceful from orbit. White clouds drifted across blue oceans, and the night side sparkled with millions of tiny lights. The planet seemed harmless, almost primitive compared to the gleaming metal worlds of the Zephyrian Empire. But Vexthara had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving. "Report," he said to his intelligence officer, a tall alien with silver skin and 4 arms. "The planet contains approximately 8 billion life forms of the dominant species," the officer replied, his voice flat and emotionless. "They call themselves humans. Our scans show they have divided their world into nearly 200 separate territories. They appear to be in constant conflict with each other." Vexthara nodded slowly. This was normal for primitive species. Most worlds went through this phase before they developed proper civilization. What is their military capability? Crude projectile weapons, chemical explosives, and basic aircraft. They still use metal vehicles that move on wheels across the ground. Their fastest ships cannot even reach their own moon in less than 3 days. The officer paused, checking his datapad. They should pose no threat to our forces. On the planet's surface, Captain Jake Morrison was leading his squad through a training exercise in the Nevada desert. The morning sun beat down on the soldiers as they moved across the rocky terrain, their faces covered in dust and sweat. Jake had been in the army for 12 years, and he had seen combat in 3 different wars. He knew how to read the land, how to use every rock and shadow to his advantage. "Contact left," shouted Corporal Danny Price, pointing toward a ridge about 500 meters away. The squad immediately spread out, each soldier finding cover behind rocks or small hills. They moved without talking, using hand signals they had practiced thousands of times. Jake watched his men through his binoculars. They were good soldiers, but they were also something more. Each one could think for himself, make decisions in the heat of battle, and adapt to changing situations. This was what made human soldiers different from the armies of other species, though Jake had no way of knowing that yet. High above them, invisible to human eyes, a Zephyrian scout ship recorded everything. The alien observers watched the human soldiers with mild interest. They saw the scattered formation, the way the humans used the terrain, and the seemingly random movements of individual soldiers. To Zephyrian eyes, it looked like chaos. "They have no discipline," noted the scout ship's captain. "Each soldier moves independently. There is no coordination, no central control. They fight like wild animals." The Zephyrians had been studying warfare for thousands of years. Their military academies taught the same lessons that had brought victory to countless worlds. Superior technology, overwhelming firepower, and perfect coordination were the keys to success. Battles were won by the side that could deliver the most destruction in the shortest amount of time. In the Zephyrian way of war, every soldier knew exactly what to do at every moment. Commands came from the top, and everyone followed orders without question. Their formations were perfect geometric shapes, their weapons fired in coordinated volleys, and their movements were as predictable as the orbits of planets. Admiral Lisa Carter was in her office at the Pentagon when the first reports came in. Strange objects had been detected in Earth's outer atmosphere, moving in patterns that no human technology could achieve. The objects appeared to be observing Earth, but they made no attempt to communicate. Lisa had spent 30 years in the Navy, rising through the ranks to become one of the highest-ranking officers in the military. She had commanded ships in 2 wars and helped plan operations on 3 continents. She knew that when unknown forces appeared near Earth, it usually meant trouble. "What do we know about them?" she asked Colonel Ben Hayes, her chief of staff. "Not much," Ben replied, spreading photos across her desk. "They showed up 2 days ago. Our satellites can barely track them. They move faster than anything we've ever seen, and they seem to be scanning the planet." Lisa studied the fuzzy images. The objects were clearly artificial, but their design was unlike anything in Earth's military databases. They were sleek and organic-looking, more like living creatures than machines. Any attempts at communication? We've tried everything. Radio, laser, even basic mathematical sequences. They're not responding. Lisa felt a cold weight in her stomach. In her experience, visitors who watched but didn't talk were usually planning something unpleasant. Put all forces on alert, quietly. I don't want to start a panic, but I want us ready for anything. On the Zephyrian flagship, High Commander Vexthara was reviewing the final reports. His analysts had spent days studying human military capabilities, and their conclusion was unanimous. Earth would be one of the easiest conquests in Zephyrian history. The humans divide their military into separate organizations, explained Warmind Kethver, the Coalition's chief military strategist. Their armies, navies, and air forces often compete with each other rather than cooperate. They lack unified command structure. Vexthara found this hard to believe. How do they coordinate their defenses? They don't, not effectively. Each nation maintains its own military, and many of these nations are hostile to each other. We could easily turn them against each other and avoid battle entirely. The Warmind brought up a holographic display showing human military formations. Their weapons are primitive but numerous. They seem to prefer quantity over quality. Instead of a few powerful weapons, they build thousands of weak ones. This was another sign of primitiveness to Zephyrian eyes. Advanced civilizations focused their resources on creating the most powerful weapons possible. Why build 1,000 weak fighters when you could build 10 unstoppable ones? Their tactics are equally primitive, continued Kethver. They use deception, camouflage, and surprise attacks. They hide from their enemies instead of meeting them in honorable combat. Some of their soldiers even use explosives to kill themselves along with their enemies. Vexthara felt a mixture of disgust and pity. These humans sounded more like desperate animals than warriors. The Zephyrian way of war was clean and efficient. Armies met in open battle, the stronger side won, and the weaker side surrendered. With honor. These humans seemed to have no concept of honor at all. Back on Earth, Major Sam Collins was briefing his special operations team about the strange objects in orbit. His men were experienced soldiers, veterans of conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. They had learned to fight in cities, mountains, and deserts. They had faced enemies who used every trick in the book to stay alive. We don't know what they want, Sam told his team, but we know they're watching us. That usually means they're planning something. Sergeant Tony Rivera raised his hand. What if they're friendly? Maybe they're just curious about us. Maybe, Sam replied. But we're not going to bet our lives on maybe. We're going to assume they're hostile until they prove otherwise. This was the human way of thinking. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Always assume your enemy is smarter, stronger, and more dangerous than he appears. Never give up, never surrender, and never fight fair if you can help it. The Zephyrians had no understanding of this mindset. In their culture, warfare was a science with predictable rules. You calculated your enemy's strength, compared it to your own, and the stronger side won. They had never faced an enemy that refused to follow the rules. As the alien ships continued. Their silent observation, both sides prepared for what was to come. The Zephyrians saw a primitive world that would surrender after a brief demonstration of superior power. The humans saw unknown visitors who might be planning an attack. Neither side truly understood what they were about to face. The message came at dawn on a Tuesday. Admiral Lisa Carter was drinking her morning coffee when the communication arrived on every television, radio, and computer screen on Earth. The face that appeared was not human. It had gray skin, large, dark eyes, and no visible nose or mouth. When it spoke, the words came from speakers, not from any movement of its features. People of Earth, the voice said in perfect English, though it spoke in every language simultaneously across the planet. I am High Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Coalition. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. You have 24 hours to surrender your governments and military forces. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. The message ended as suddenly as it had begun. For a moment, the world was silent. Then the chaos began. Lisa was already on the phone before the message finished. "Get me the president," she told her aide, "and contact all allied military commanders. We're going to need everyone for this." Across the world, military leaders were having similar conversations. In Moscow, Beijing, London, and every other capital, the same questions were being asked. Were these aliens serious? Did they really have the power to destroy Earth? And most importantly, what were humans going to do about it? The answer came 23 hours later when the Zephyrian ships descended from orbit. Lieutenant Colonel Maya Johnson was commanding the garrison at Fort Carson when the first alien craft appeared over Denver. It was massive, easily the size of a city block, and it floated silently above the skyline like a metal cloud. As Maya watched through her binoculars, smaller ships began emerging from the mothership. "All units, this is Base Command," she spoke into her radio. "We have visual contact with hostile aircraft. Weapons are hot. Engage on my command." The Zephyrian landing ships touched down in perfect formation on the plains outside the city. Each ship was identical, landing exactly 1,000 meters apart in a straight line. The aliens emerged wearing silver armor that seemed to glow in the morning light. They carried weapons that looked like polished metal rods, and they moved with mechanical precision. Maya had studied the brief intelligence reports about these aliens. They fought in perfect formations, using advanced energy weapons that could cut through steel. Their armor could stop any human weapon, and their ships were fast enough to outrun fighter jets. On paper they were unbeatable, but Maya had learned long ago that wars were not fought on paper. "First Battalion, take positions in the industrial district," she ordered. "Second Battalion, spread out through the residential areas. Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to make them pay for every inch." The Zephyrians advanced toward Denver exactly as their training manuals dictated. They formed 3 perfect columns, each one aimed at a different section of the city. Their weapons were charged and ready, their communications were clear, and their officers were confident of quick victory. Staff Sergeant Tony Rivera was hiding in an abandoned warehouse when the first alien column reached the outskirts of the city. He watched through a broken window as the silver-armored figures marched down the empty street in perfect formation. They looked impressive, almost invincible. But Tony had fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he knew that impressive-looking enemies often had weaknesses. The Zephyrians expected human soldiers to meet them in open battle. They had calculated how long it would take their superior weapons to cut through human defenses. They had planned for human aircraft to attack their ships. They had prepared for everything except what actually happened. Nothing. The humans had vanished. The Zephyrian column marched through empty streets, past abandoned cars and silent buildings. Their sensors showed no signs of human military activity. No soldiers, no weapons, no resistance at all. It was as if the entire city had been evacuated. Commander Zektar, leading the first column, felt confused. This was not how primitive species were supposed to behave. They should have gathered their forces for a final desperate battle. Instead, the humans had simply disappeared. "Advance to the city center," he ordered his troops. "Maintain formation. Watch for ambush." The word ambush was barely out of his mouth when the first building exploded. Tony had placed the charges 3 hours earlier. He had learned how to use improvised explosives during his deployment in Afghanistan, fighting insurgents who used similar tactics. The blast brought down a 4-story office building directly onto the Zephyrian column. The aliens' energy shields protected them from the falling concrete, but the debris blocked their path and broke their perfect formation. As they struggled to clear the rubble, more explosions erupted around them. Buildings collapsed, cars exploded, and the street itself seemed to turn against them. "Contact left," shouted a Zephyrian soldier as muzzle flashes appeared in a window 3 blocks away. But by the time they turned their weapons toward the building, the human sniper was already gone. This was not the warfare the Zephyrians understood. In their culture, armies met in open fields and fought until one side was destroyed. The stronger side won through superior firepower and technology. There were rules, traditions, and honor codes that governed how battles were fought. The humans were ignoring all of these rules. Corporal Danny Price was moving through the sewer system beneath downtown Denver when his radio crackled. "Danny, this is Maya. Report your position." "I'm under 5th Street," Danny whispered. "The aliens are about 2 blocks north of me. They're moving slow, trying to clear the rubble." "Good. Hit them from behind and then get out of there. Don't try to fight them face to face." Danny understood. In a fair fight, one human soldier against one Zephyrian warrior, the alien would win every time. But this was not going to be a fair fight. Danny had no intention of fighting fair. He climbed up through a manhole cover behind the alien column. The Zephyrians were focused on the buildings ahead of them, watching for snipers and booby traps. They had not thought to guard their rear. Danny's rocket launcher was an old model, the kind used by infantry forces for decades. It was not particularly accurate, and it certainly was not high-tech. But it was effective. The rocket struck the rear Zephyrian vehicle, causing it to explode in a ball of flames. Before the aliens could react, Danny was gone. He dropped back into the sewer and was crawling away before the first alien soldier reached the manhole cover. By the time they organized a search party, he was already 6 blocks away. Colonel Ben Hayes was coordinating the defense from a mobile command post hidden in the mountains outside Denver. Every few hours, his team would pack up their equipment and move to a new location. The Zephyrians kept targeting what they thought was the human command center, only to find empty buildings or decoy installations. Reports from all sectors. Ben said to his staff, "1st Battalion has delayed the northern column by 4 hours. 2nd Battalion reports 12 enemy casualties with no losses on our side. 3rd Battalion has successfully evacuated all civilians from the combat zone." This was the key to the human strategy. The Zephyrians expected to fight an army. Instead, they were fighting a ghost. Every time they thought they had found the human forces, their enemies would disappear and reappear somewhere else. Captain Amy Fox was flying her F-16 fighter when she received new orders. "All aircraft, this is base command. Do not engage the alien ships directly. Hit their ground forces and then get out of there." Amy understood the logic. Her fighter jet was fast and maneuverable, but it could not match the firepower of an alien warship. In a direct confrontation, she would lose. But she was not planning a direct confrontation. She came in low and fast, using the city's buildings to mask her approach. The Zephyrians were so focused on the ground battle that they did not notice her until she was already making her attack. Run. Her missiles struck a group of alien soldiers who were trying to clear a roadblock. The aliens' energy shields absorbed most of the damage, but the explosions created smoke and dust that blinded their sensors. While they were trying to regain their sight, Amy was already gone. Flying low between the buildings and heading back to base, the Zephyrians fired their energy weapons at empty air. High Commander Vexthara watched the battle from his flagship. In orbit, the reports from the ground were disturbing. His forces were advancing, but much more slowly than expected. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had encountered before. "Status report," he demanded. "The humans are avoiding direct confrontation," replied his intelligence officer. "They attack from hiding, then disappear before we can respond. They are using the city itself as a weapon." Vexthara did not understand. How could primitives be causing problems for his advanced forces? Send reinforcements. Double the ground. Forces, but even as more alien ships landed, the pattern continued. The humans would strike and vanish, like ghosts in the night. They seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. By sunset, the Zephyrian forces had advanced only 10 blocks into the city. They had lost 15 vehicles and suffered dozens of casualties. Most shocking of all, they had barely seen any human soldiers. The enemy was there, but invisible. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Zephyrian military force was forced to stop and reconsider its tactics. The humans were not fighting by the rules of civilized warfare. 3 weeks had passed since the first battle in Denver, and the Zephyrians were learning that conquering Earth was not going to be as simple as they had planned. Their forces now occupied parts of 12 major cities, but each victory came at a cost that High Commander Vexthara had not expected. Major Sam Collins crouched in the darkness outside the Zephyrian forward base near Chicago. The alien facility was a perfect example of their military thinking. It was built in a clear area with no cover for attackers, surrounded by energy barriers and defended by automated weapon systems. To Zephyrian eyes, it was impregnable. To human eyes, it was a trap waiting to be sprung. Sam had been studying the base for 5 days, watching the patterns of the guards, timing their patrols, and noting their weaknesses. The Zephyrians changed their guard duties every 12 hours, exactly on schedule. They followed the same patrol routes every time. They even took their meal breaks at the same moments each day. "Perfect discipline," Sam whispered to Sergeant Maria Santos, who was lying beside him in the tall grass. "And that's going to be their downfall." Maria had been born in El Paso and had grown up crossing the border to visit her grandmother in Mexico. She understood how to move through hostile territory without being seen, how to blend into crowds, and how to disappear when trouble came looking for her. These skills had served her well in the army, and they were about to serve her even better against the aliens. "What's the plan?" she asked. Sam pointed to a drainage pipe that ran under the base. "The Zephyrians scan for energy weapons and metal objects, but they don't pay attention to water systems. We go in through the sewers, plant our charges, and get out before they know we're there." This was typical human thinking. Instead of attacking the base's strengths, they would attack its weaknesses. Instead of fighting the battle the enemy wanted to fight, they would fight the battle they could win. The Zephyrians had brought their best military analysts to Earth to study the human way of war. Warmind Kethver had spent centuries analyzing the tactics of dozens of different species, but humans were unlike anything he had encountered before. "They do not fight to win battles," he reported to High Commander Vexthara. "They fight to avoid losing wars. Every engagement is designed to weaken us rather than defeat us." Vexthara did not understand the difference. Explained, "In normal warfare, both sides try to destroy the other's military forces. The humans are trying to destroy our will to continue fighting. They make every victory cost more than it is worth." Kethver brought up a holographic display showing human attack patterns. "They do not target our strongest units. They target our supply lines, our communications, our support personnel. They force us to waste resources defending targets that have no military value." This was exactly what was happening at the Chicago base. While the Zephyrians had concentrated their defenses around the main facility, Sam and his team were crawling through the sewers beneath it. They were not trying to capture the base or destroy it completely. They were trying to make it too expensive to maintain. The drainage system was cramped and dark, but it led directly under the alien power generators. Sam's team moved silently through the tunnels, their equipment wrapped in cloth to prevent any sound. Each soldier carried enough explosives to damage but not destroy the generators. "Remember," Sam whispered as they approached their target, "we're not trying to win this fight. We're trying to make them wish they never started it." The explosives were small and carefully placed. They would not destroy the power generators, but they would damage them enough to require constant repairs. The Zephyrians would have to bring in replacement parts, assign more guards, and spend time and resources fixing problems that should not have existed. Sergeant First Class Joe Miller was working on a different kind of sabotage 50 miles away. He was an engineer by training, and he understood that the most effective way to defeat an enemy was to make their own technology work against them. The Zephyrians had built their communication tower on the highest hill in the area, exactly where their military manuals said it should be. It had a clear view in all directions, it was easy to defend, and it could reach all of their forces in the region. It was also the perfect place for Joe to set up his own equipment. "Human technology is primitive," he said to his team as they assembled their radio transmitter. "That's exactly why this is going to work." Joe's plan was simple but brilliant. The Zephyrians had never encountered radio interference, because their own communication systems were too advanced to be affected by it. But Joe was not trying to interfere with their communications. He was trying to make them think they were being jammed. His transmitter would send out signals that looked like military communications but were actually completely random. The Zephyrians would detect these signals and assume they were intercepting human radio traffic. They would waste time trying to decode meaningless noise while their real communications remained unprotected. "They'll think we're everywhere," Joe explained. "They'll start seeing threats that don't exist and missing threats that do." Captain Amy Fox was discovering that the same principle worked in aerial combat. Her fighter squadron had been engaging Zephyrian aircraft for 2 weeks, but they were not trying to shoot down alien ships. They were trying to make the aliens paranoid. Amy's F-16 was fast and maneuverable, but it could not match the firepower of a Zephyrian fighter. In a direct confrontation, she would lose every time. But she was not planning direct confrontations. Instead, she would appear on radar for just long enough to make the aliens turn toward her, then disappear before they could get a weapons lock. She would pop up behind them, fire a few shots that missed on purpose, then vanish again before they could respond. "They're starting to jump at shadows," she reported to Base Command. "Every time they see a bird on radar, they think it's a fighter jet." This was psychological warfare at its finest. The Zephyrians were being forced to waste fuel and ammunition chasing ghosts. Their pilots were becoming tired and nervous, expecting attacks that never came and missing real threats when they appeared. Colonel Ben Hayes had moved his mobile command post again, this time to an abandoned school in the mountains. His staff was analyzing reports from all over the world, and the pattern was clear. Human forces were not winning battles, but they were winning something more important. "Casualty reports," he said to his intelligence officer. "Zephyrian losses are increasing daily," came the reply. "Not from major battles, but from small incidents. Sniper attacks, sabotage, equipment failures, accidents that might not be accidents." Ben nodded. This was exactly what he had hoped to hear. "What about their morale?" "Intelligence suggests they're getting frustrated. They expected to be done with Earth by now. Instead, they're having to commit more resources every day just to maintain their positions." This was the key to the human strategy. The Zephyrians had calculated that conquering Earth would require a certain amount of resources for a certain amount of time. The humans were making sure that calculation was wrong. Every day the war continued. The aliens had to spend more energy, more ammunition, more time defending what they had already taken. Every small victory for the humans made the next battle a little bit harder for the Zephyrians. Back at the Chicago base, Sam's explosives detonated exactly on schedule. The power generators did not explode, but they began producing irregular power that made the base's defense systems unreliable. The Zephyrians would have to shut down the entire facility, bring in repair crews, and spend days fixing problems that should not have existed. "Phase 1 complete," Sam reported as his team escaped through the same sewers they had used to enter. "Target damaged but not destroyed. Enemy will be forced to commit additional resources to repairs." Warmind Kethfer was studying these latest reports when he began to understand something that chilled him to his core. The humans were not fighting random, chaotic battles. They were fighting a coordinated campaign designed to slowly bleed the Zephyrian forces to death. "They are not trying to defeat us," he told High Commander Vexthara. "They are trying to make us defeat ourselves." Vexthara did not understand. How is that possible? "Every attack forces us to respond. Every response costs us resources. Every resource we spend on defense is a resource we cannot use for offense. They are turning our own strength against us." Kethfer brought up a new display showing resource allocation. "We came to Earth with enough supplies for a 3-week campaign. We have now been here for 3 weeks, and we control less than 10% of the planet. At this rate, we will run out of supplies before we run out of humans to fight." This was the moment when the Zephyrians began to realize they were not fighting a primitive species. They were fighting a species that had evolved warfare into an art form. Every human soldier was capable of independent thought, creative problem-solving, and adaptation to changing circumstances. The aliens had superior technology, but the humans had superior strategy. The Zephyrians could win any single battle, but the humans were winning the war by making sure that every battle cost more than it was worth. As night fell over the battlefield, both sides prepared for the next phase of the conflict. The Zephyrians were beginning to understand that they had underestimated their enemy. High Commander Vexthara stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring down at the blue and white planet that had become his greatest nightmare. 6 weeks had passed since the invasion began, and his forces were no closer to victory than they had been on the first day. If anything, the situation was getting worse. Casualties? He asked his aide. 17% of ground forces lost or wounded, came the reply. Supply lines under constant attack. Morale dropping in all units. Vexthara felt something he had never experienced before in 3 centuries of military service. Doubt. The humans were supposed to be primitive savages, easy to defeat and quick to surrender. Instead, they had turned his technological superiority into a liability and his military precision into a weakness. Enough, he said finally. If they will not surrender to our ground forces, we will force surrender from orbit. Prepare the planetary bombardment systems. This was the Zephyrian way of solving problems that could not be solved with conventional tactics. When ground forces failed, orbital bombardments succeed. The humans had no defense against weapons fired from space. They would surrender or they would die. Admiral Lisa Carter was in the deep bunker beneath NORAD when the first orbital strikes began. The mountain shook as energy beams from space struck military bases around the world. In minutes, decades of military construction were reduced to smoking craters. Casualties? She asked her staff. Minimal, replied Colonel Ben Hayes. We evacuated all major installations 3 days ago. Lisa allowed herself a small smile. The humans had been preparing for this escalation since the invasion began. While the Zephyrians thought they were destroying Earth's military capacity, they were actually destroying empty buildings and abandoned equipment. Phase 2? She asked. Already in motion, Ben replied. Operation Swarm is go. 2,000 miles above Earth, something the Zephyrians had never seen before began to unfold. From seemingly empty space, thousands of small objects suddenly became visible. They were not military spacecraft in any traditional sense. They were converted civilian satellites, modified drones, and jury-rigged scientific equipment that had been hidden in Earth's orbital debris field. Dr. Rachel Green had spent her entire career studying space debris. She knew where every piece of junk in Earth orbit was located, how fast it was moving, and where it would be at any given time. When the military asked her to help hide a fleet of improvised weapons, she had used that knowledge to create the largest shell game in history. Activate all units, she said from her control center in Houston. Let's show these aliens what human engineering can do. The Zephyrian sensor operators watched in confusion as their screens suddenly filled with thousands of targets. They had been tracking 43 human military satellites. Now there were over 8,000 objects in orbit, and all of them were moving in directions that defied prediction. Impossible, muttered the chief sensor technician. Where did they all come from? The answer was simple. They had always been there. Hidden among the space junk, disguised as broken satellites, camouflaged as natural debris. The humans had turned Earth's orbital environment into a massive ambush. Kevin Park had been a video game designer before the war. He specialized in real-time strategy games where players controlled hundreds of units simultaneously. When the military recruited him to help coordinate the orbital defense, he brought skills that no traditional military officer possessed. Think of it like a game, he explained to his team of operators. We don't need to destroy their ships. We just need to make it impossible for them to target anything accurately. The converted satellites and drones did not carry powerful weapons. Most of them carried nothing more dangerous than signal jammers, reflective chaff, and small explosive charges. But there were thousands of them, and they moved in coordinated swarms that made precision targeting impossible. The Zephyrians tried to shoot down the human devices, but it was like trying to kill a cloud of insects with a rifle. Every time they destroyed one target, 10 more appeared to take its place. Their powerful weapons, designed to destroy large military targets, were almost useless against small, fast-moving objects. Captain Amy Fox was leading the first wave of human fighters launched from hidden bases around the world. Her F-16 had been modified with extra fuel tanks and stealth coating, but it was still hopelessly outmatched by Zephyrian technology. That was exactly why her mission was going to work. "Remember," she told her squadron over the radio, "we're not trying to win a dogfight. We're trying to be so annoying that they can't concentrate on bombing the ground." Amy's fighters used the swarm of orbital debris as cover, popping out to fire missiles at Zephyrian ships before disappearing back into the chaos. The aliens would try to pursue, but chasing one fighter meant losing track of dozens of others. The Zephyrians had never faced anything like this before. In their experience, space battles were orderly affairs between large ships with powerful weapons. This was three-dimensional guerrilla warfare, fought in an environment where the humans could appear from any direction at any time. Major Sam Collins was watching the orbital battle from his new base hidden in the Rocky Mountains. His Special Forces team had been reassigned to coordinate ground-based attacks that would support the space combat. "Time to give our flyboys some help," he told his men. "Light them up." Around the world, hidden missile batteries came online. They had been disguised as everything from radio towers to grain silos, scattered across 6 continents and programmed to fire simultaneously. The missiles were not powerful enough to seriously damage Zephyrian ships, but they forced the aliens to divide their attention between orbital threats and ground-based attacks. "They're trying to fight a three-dimensional battle," observed Sergeant Maria Santos as she watched the alien ships maneuvering frantically above them. "We're making them fight a four-dimensional one." She was right. The humans had added time as a factor in the battle. The Zephyrians could not predict when or where the next attack would come from because the humans were constantly changing their tactics, their positions, and their objectives. Warmind Kethver was trying to make sense of the tactical data when he realized something that made his blood run cold. The humans were not just fighting defensively. They were learning. "Every engagement teaches them something new about our capabilities," he reported to High Commander Vextara. "They adapt faster than we can change our tactics." The evidence was overwhelming. Human attack patterns evolved in real time based on Zephyrian responses. When the aliens concentrated their defenses in one area, human forces would immediately shift to attack somewhere else. When the Zephyrians changed their formation, the humans would find new ways to exploit the weaknesses of the new arrangement. "They are treating this entire war as a learning experience," Kethver continued. "Every battle makes them more effective." In the next battle, this was perhaps the most alien concept the Zephyrians had encountered. In their culture, military tactics were perfected over centuries and then followed without deviation. The idea of constantly changing strategy based on immediate feedback was completely foreign to them. Lieutenant Colonel Maya Johnson was coordinating ground defenses from her mobile command post when she received reports that the orbital battle was succeeding beyond all expectations. "Zephyrian bombardment has stopped," her communications officer reported. "They're too busy dealing with our swarm attacks to target ground positions." Maya felt a moment of satisfaction. The humans had successfully turned what should have been their weakest point into their strongest advantage. The Zephyrians had expected easy targets on the ground, but instead they were fighting a space battle against opponents who refused to follow the rules. "All ground units begin Phase 3 operations," she ordered. "While they're looking up, we hit them down here." Human forces that had been hiding for weeks suddenly emerged from underground bunkers, abandoned buildings, and hidden camps. They struck at Zephyrian supply lines, communication centers, and isolated outposts. The aliens found themselves fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. With no way to predict where the next attack would come from, the Zephyrians tried to respond by bringing more ships into orbit, but this only made the problem worse. More ships meant more targets for the human swarm attacks. It also meant more resources devoted to space combat and fewer available for ground operations. Dr. Rachel Green was monitoring the battle from her control center when she realized they had achieved something unprecedented in human history. "We're actually winning a space battle," she told her team, "against aliens with technology centuries ahead of ours." The key was not superior technology or overwhelming firepower. The key was superior strategy and the willingness to fight unconventionally. The humans had turned the Zephyrians' expectations against them, creating a battle that the aliens were not prepared to fight. High Commander Vexthara watched his carefully planned invasion dissolve into chaos. His ships were scattered across Earth's orbital space, chasing targets that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. His ground forces were pinned down by enemies they could not find. His supply lines were under constant attack from forces that seemed to know exactly where to strike. "Options?" he asked his staff. "We could retreat and request reinforcements." 2 months after the invasion began, High Commander Vexthara made a decision that would have been unthinkable when the war started. He activated the emergency beacon that would summon the Void Hunters to Earth. The Void Hunters were the elite of the elite warriors who had never known defeat in 300 years of service to the Zephyrian coalition. They were faster, stronger, and more skilled than any soldier in the galaxy. Each one was worth 100 regular troops, and they had crushed rebellions on dozens of worlds. "If our regular forces cannot defeat these humans," Vexthara told his staff, "then we will send warriors who cannot be defeated." The Void Hunters arrived in ships that were black as space itself, moving through Earth's orbital defenses like shadows. They landed at night, deploying in perfect silence to hunting grounds across the planet. Their mission was simple: find and eliminate the human leadership that was coordinating the resistance. Master Sergeant Daniel Webb was checking the perimeter of his hidden base in the Appalachian Mountains when his motion sensors detected something that should not have been there. The readings showed a humanoid figure moving through the forest, but it was moving too fast and too quietly to be human. "Contact," he whispered into his radio. "Unknown hostile approaching from the north. All units to defensive positions." Daniel had been fighting for 25 years, first in Iraq, then in Afghanistan, and now against aliens who wanted to enslave his planet. He had learned that in war the enemy always had surprises, and the survivors were the ones who adapted fastest to those surprises. The Void Hunter that emerged from the tree line was unlike any Zephyrian soldier the humans had encountered before. Its armor was sleek and dark, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. It moved with fluid grace like a predator that had evolved for the sole purpose of killing. In its hands was a weapon that hummed with deadly energy, and its helmet contained sensors that could track a target through solid rock. It was, by every measurable standard, the perfect warrior. It was also about to learn why measurements did not always matter. Daniel's team consisted of 5 soldiers, each one a veteran of multiple deployments. Corporal Lisa Grant had grown up hunting deer in Montana and could place a rifle shot in a 6-inch circle at 800 yards. Sergeant Mike Torres had been an explosives expert before the war and could turn anything into a bomb with enough creativity. Private First Class Kelly Ryan was barely 20 years old, but she had reflexes that bordered on supernatural and could move through hostile territory like smoke against the Void Hunter. Each of them would lose in single combat, but they were not planning to fight single combat. "Spread out," Daniel ordered. "Kelly, you're the rabbit. Lead him into the valley. Mike, Lisa, set up crossfire positions. I'll take overwatch." The Void Hunter detected the human thermal signatures and began moving toward them with confidence. In its experience, primitive species either fled in terror or charged to their deaths. These humans seemed to be doing neither, which was puzzling, but not concerning. Kelly emerged from behind a fallen tree and fired 3 shots at the alien warrior. Her bullets sparked harmlessly off its armor, exactly as she had expected. The Void Hunter turned toward her and began pursuit, moving faster than any human could run. But Kelly was not trying to outrun it. She was trying to lead it. The chase led through a narrow valley where Mike had spent the previous day placing charges. As the Void Hunter pursued its target, it triggered pressure sensors that Mike had salvaged from old landmines. The explosions were not powerful enough to penetrate the alien's armor, but they filled the air with smoke, dust, and debris that confused its sensors. While the Void Hunter struggled to reacquire its target, Lisa opened fire from a concealed position on the ridge above. Her rifle could not damage the alien's armor, but it could force the warrior to take cover. While it was pinned down, Daniel moved to a new position. This was the human way of war. No single soldier tried to match the enemy's strength. Instead, each soldier used their own abilities to support the others, creating a fighting force that was stronger than the sum of its parts. The Void Hunter was programmed with the combat patterns of 100 different species, but none of them fought like this. Most warriors either fought alone or fought in rigid formations. These humans seemed to fight as individuals while somehow remaining perfectly coordinated. "Where is it?" Kelly asked over the radio as she took cover behind a boulder. "Moving toward your position," Daniel replied from his overwatch point. 20 meters and closing. I don't see anything." "That's because it's learning," Mike said grimly. "It's using our own tactics against us." This was true. The Void Hunter had adapted to human stealth techniques with terrifying speed. It was now moving through the forest without triggering any sensors, using the terrain for cover just as the humans did. But the humans had one advantage that the alien warrior did not expect. They were not just fighting as individuals supporting each other. They were fighting as people who cared about each other. When the Void Hunter finally revealed itself, it did so by attacking Kelly from behind. Its energy weapon discharged with a sound like thunder, and Kelly cried out as she dove for cover. The shot missed, but barely. The reaction from her teammates was immediate and instinctive. Lisa's rifle cracked from the ridge, not aimed at the Void Hunter but at the cliff face above it. Tons of loose rock came crashing down, forcing the alien to retreat. Mike triggered a series of explosions that cut off its escape routes. Daniel moved to a position where he could provide covering fire for Kelly's withdrawal. None of these actions were planned or coordinated through radio communication. They simply happened because 4 soldiers who had fought together for months knew how their teammates would react in any situation. The Void Hunter found itself trapped in a killing ground that had been created in seconds by soldiers who had never discussed this specific scenario. It was facing an enemy that fought not just with weapons and tactics, but with trust, instinct, and emotional bonds that transcended military training. Colonel Alex Rodriguez was coordinating the global response to the Void Hunter deployment from his command bunker deep beneath the Colorado mountains. Reports were coming in from around the world as humanity's best soldiers faced the aliens' ultimate warriors. "Status report from all sectors," he requested. "Bravo team has successfully eliminated their target," came the first report. "Alpha team is engaged but holding their position." "Charlie team reports enemy contact but no casualties," Rodriguez nodded grimly. The humans were holding their own against the Void Hunters, but just barely. Each engagement was costing resources and lives that Earth could not afford to lose. But more importantly, each battle was teaching the humans something crucial about their enemy. "Analysis?" he asked his intelligence officer. "The Void Hunters are individually superior to our soldiers in every measurable way," came the reply. "But they're fighting as individuals. They're not coordinating with each other or adapting to our group tactics." This was the key insight. The Zephyrians had created perfect warriors, but they had not created perfect soldiers. There was a difference between fighting ability and military effectiveness. And the humans were about to demonstrate that difference to the galaxy. Admiral Lisa Carter was aboard the newly launched USS Freedom, humanity's first combat spacecraft built specifically to fight aliens. The ship was not as fast or as powerful as Zephyrian vessels, but it had been designed by people who understood that technology alone did not win wars. "Take us in," she ordered the helmsman. "It's time to end this." The Freedom approached the Zephyrian flagship not to engage in combat, but to deliver a message. Admiral Carter had requested a meeting with High Commander Vextara, and surprisingly, the alien leader had agreed. The two commanders met in the shuttle bay of the Zephyrian flagship. Surrounded by soldiers from both sides, Vexthara looked older than he had at the beginning of the war, worn down by weeks of fighting an enemy he did not understand. "You have fought well," he admitted to Carter, "but you cannot win. Our technology is superior. Our warriors are stronger. Our resources are vast." Carter looked at the alien commander with something that might have been pity. "You still don't understand, do you? You think this war is about technology. You think it's about strength. You think it's about resources. What else could it be about?" Vexthara asked. "It's about will," Carter replied. "It's about the refusal to give up. It's about fighting not because you can win, but because you cannot accept losing." She gestured toward the viewport where Earth hung blue and white in the darkness. "You came here expecting to fight our military. But you're not fighting our military. You're fighting our entire species. Every human who picks up a weapon becomes a soldier. Every human who refuses to surrender becomes a threat." Vexthara shook his head. "Your species will be extinct if this war continues. We have reinforcements coming. More ships, more warriors, more weapons than you can imagine. And we have something you don't," Carter said quietly. "We have a reason to fight that goes beyond orders or conquest or empire. We're fighting for our homes, our families, our future. You're fighting because someone told you to." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Your soldiers follow orders. Our soldiers follow their hearts."